From the very start of the race, the crowd of 135,000 wait tensely for the spectacle.
Larry Bisceglia is a pretty interesting figure when it comes to Indianapolis 500 lore.
Larry was a super fan, really, and he was somebody that was trying to figure out, how can I get to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, spend my month there around the Indy 500. I want to do it in a special way. I want to be the first in line.
Not a driver, he was not a car owner, but in some cases he was probably one of the more popular entities at the Speedway. You know, this man who was salt of the earth, fixing tires or helping people with automobiles, but made this record in this attempt and made a name for himself coming back and forth to over 35 Indianapolis 500s consecutively. We're almost 40 years from his last appearance, but you still have people reminiscing of those days that he was at the Speedway.
My dad was a huge race fan, and I got that from him. Love of cars, love of speed, the sound, it just drew me in.
I was 15, and even before the race started, I was in love with it. The ceremonies alone got me, and I decided at that moment I'm going to be part of it in some way or another. All in all, I've covered the race in one way or another for 50 years. So.
Month of May was almost to the end of the school year, so it's like you look forward to that because, hey, you had a race and then school's over.
What was so neat was riding your bicycles through the neighborhoods and seeing all the racing displays. Everyone decorated their homes. The Goodyear blimp would come in early. And
Larry's in town. Now things are starting to get serious.
Larry Bisceglia lining up to be first in line was the official start of May in the Indy 500. For a while he came with his really ugly old truck that he owned, and somebody broke down and helped him get a new one. It was covered with decals and stickers, and and you drive past, you'd honk at him, he'd always be out there. But he was, maybe cantankerous is the word for him. He always had this little sly look. He always had his railroad engineer's cap on. And,
he either looked like a railroader or a farmer, or, I don't think he ever wore tux. You never saw Larry Bisceglia dressed up, I'll put it that way.
He wasn't commercial, so he was just Larry. So Speedway thought that was pretty cool, and by the south gate there had a little pull-off where he parked his truck. It was a tradition, I think, more than anything else. You went and you lined up for the Indy 500, and he loved it and sure gave him a lot of popularity and really helped the Speedway.
500 miles at 104 and 8/10 miles per hour.
I think part of the reason he lined up is he literally wanted to be the first one in the gates when the gates opened to kick the things off in May. So it wasn't just really race day, right? It's like, how can I be the first one to spend my month of May here? I think Larry thought, man, if I'm first in line, maybe I'll get some sort of prize, like letting me in for free, which in fact wasn't the case. They actually charged him for a period of time, and so he didn't get that benefit until later in time here. So it would have been a lot different, but definitely, Larry would have gone through the same ticket process and had to pay just like everyone else.
The 500 today, just the demand, people do line up on 16th Street and the other entrances, but Larry took it to an extreme. When he showed up in 1948, he thought he was going to be first and people were already lined up in front of him. He showed back up in 49 and was a little bit closer to the front, but obviously still had people in front of him. So when he joined us in 1950, I think he showed up somewhere like May 15th or middle of the month to line up, and then would always be that staple first in line for the next 35, 37 years. Larry lived a pretty long life, and that streak continued later in his life. In the mid-1980s, obviously his health started to prevent him of making that trip. I think 85 may have been the last year that he made the actual drive.
And legend has it that in 1986, when he didn't show up, that people started worrying, and our news media, the Star, put out like an all-points bulletin. How do you find Larry Bisceglia, and they actually found him in Yuma, Arizona, sleeping in the van that he would have used to get in line for the Indy 500.
And then people started raising money to fly him back. I believe 87 was his final year, making it out to the Speedway in some fashion. But then, unfortunately, 88, I think his health got in the way, and then passed away later that year at 90. So, like every good thing, has to end at the end of the day. But it just adds to that story and how much people connected with Larry to try to see him continue his streak. Obviously, when health and other issues were getting in the way.
He lived at the yard, yeah. From what I'm told, he loved fidgeting with wood things. And when my boss told me, he made a crescent wrench that worked out of wood, which is pretty impressive if you have the time to do that. I really don't know much about what his role was at the yard. He probably worked pulling parts. That was way before my time. My boss, Dick, who owned Dick's Towing, he told me the story about Larry and the van. The van was out in the yard when I started working there, and I asked him, what's with the van? And he told me the story of, Larry going to the Indianapolis 500 every year. Our boss died, and they had to sell the property and liquidate the place. So we had to get all the cars moved or crushed. We had to clean the yard out, and we had just a couple weeks to do it. I dug through the trash when they were throwing everything out of the shop because they're throwing good stuff away. So I was digging through the trash, and I come across the suitcase. I opened it up, and it was Larry's pictures. I knew the history of the van a little bit, so I decided to take the pictures, and they were going to crush the van, so I asked if I could have the van. Everybody at the yard goes, why do you want this van? It's a piece of junk. And I go, I don't know. I think it's cool. You can't just crush this thing, It's got some history behind it. And I think it looked pretty cool in my driveway with all the stickers, and maybe I'll do something crazy with this thing. I was gonna maybe make a hot rod out of it or something until I knew more of the story behind it. When I had the van, everybody that had anything to do with these Indy cars were telling me it needs to belong in the museum. So I put it for sale, and I had a couple failed attempts. And I woke up one morning to a phone call. It was the guys from Gas Monkey Garage. And after that phone call, I started getting more phone calls. And I had like 3 or 4 phone calls within an hour. The next guy that called me goes, hey, what do you want for the van? I'll buy it right now. And I go, I can't sell it to you. I already made a deal with Gas Monkey Garage. The guy got mad and hung up on me. They thought they were gonna do something crazy with this van, but it turns out that they just donated it to the museum, which is cool. That's probably where it belongs anyway. So I'm glad to see that it went there.
Yeah, so what I do is I oversee the collection at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum. So we have nearly 200 vehicles and over 55,000 pieces of non-vehicle artifacts. Larry's van is very unique and special to me because it was my first car I guess I took in on donation. I was fairly young in my role at the museum, but got a call that this maybe aesthetically non-pleasing vehicle obviously was original. There was an opportunity to acquire it, so having to work with the board and the museum staff at the time to see the value in this, see not only its history but its connection to your race fan, and bring it to the Speedway, bring it to the museum. Obviously the Gas Monkey aspect was another component that was neat, but when I look at that van, and then alongside the panel van that we received in '67, having those two pieces in the museum is pretty special to me.
As for whether his street could ever be broken, I mean, it's so hard now. It's a different era. It's busier streets. I'm sure that if you parked on the street right now, some Speedway police officer would come and say, hey man, you can't park here. So I think that's one of those records, probably like A.J. Foyt's 35 starts in the Indianapolis 500, Larry's 37 first in lines, probably doesn't get broken.
I mean, there's a lot of stories when it comes to Indianapolis 500 and the Motor Speedway, and this is one of the more unique ones. Larry's connection in those 35 plus years, 37 years of being first in line. And the ability to have both the vans, to have the briefcase with some assortment of press kits and other items that belong to Larry, it touches on that the human story of the 500. Obviously, you have these 33 gladiators that are racing for 200 laps, 500 miles around the speedway, but then it's connects more to the stories that you hear of people in the grandstands. It's almost a family reunion for them, the people that sit around them. You see these people once or twice a year if they go to the 500 and other races, and they're almost like family. And a lot of people, even though he wasn't family, they connected to Larry like he was a family member and wanted to see him continue that streak and wanted to help him when times got difficult for him, and really became that one of the icons of the Motor Speedway.